Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each week, we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I'm Benedicte, and I'm feeling excited.
And I'm Benedikt. Today is May 2nd, and this is episode number 200.
Woo! 200! Oh my God.
And I'm feeling amazed that we made it to 200. That's a lot of episodes.
That is a lot of episodes. And I think you have you're the one with the most episodes.
I guess, yeah, because I've been there from the start and didn't quit along the way, so.
You are kind of the embodiment of slow and steady, just like chugging along and doing your thing, even when you don't want to. So I see here that you have 192 episode. Brian, who was your co-host from the beginning, has 119, and then I have 104.
Oh, you're catching him soon.
Catching up. Well, now that we're doing episodes every other week, it might take a while to catch up.
True. Yeah, true.
True. And for this episode, we thought we'd reintroduce ourselves.
I think we did the same thing at 100, right? So I think we're doing that for every milestone episode.
I think maybe we should do it for every 50th because you pick up new listeners along the way, and it probably could be nice to have a little bit of a reintroduction. So, Benedikt, what were you doing when you started recording Slow and Steady back in, was it June of 2019?
I think it was June 2019 or something like that. Yeah. Okay, let me think back. Back then, I think yes, we were already working on user list. So that's the company I'm currently working on, running together with my co-founder Jane. Back then, I think we were still a co-founding team of 3. So it was Jane Portman, Claire Solentrop, and me. And I think we had just announced the product earlier that year, and we're basically, or actually, no, we actually started in 2017. So we worked on this for all of 2018, and then in 2019, I feel like when we started recording the podcast, I think the product was already sort of running, but we hadn't publicly launched yet. So that was the thing that that happened that year. And I think when we recorded episode 1, we were just preparing for launch, if I remember correctly. Anyways,
And what does
back then,
Userless do for those who are
right.
new?
Userlist is an email marketing automation platform for software as a service applications. So it basically sends emails on your behalf based on behavior of your users inside your application. And that was the initial concept and initial idea, and it grew from that a little bit. So now we also do marketing email and lead capture and stuff like that. But it's still at the core, it's still automation for emails for SaaS, I guess. Yeah. So that's user list. Back in 2019, I think we were all still consulting on the side. So I have been a software developer for, well, a couple of years now, at least 15 years or something like that professionally. And I think I started freelancing in 2013. Yeah, I think in 2013, April 2013. It's 11 years by now. So back then, 2019, when we started recording the podcast, I was a freelancer and building the product on the side, basically. What about you? We didn't even know each other in 2019. So what did you do back then?
Yeah, because I came on board June 2021. 2 years later, actually. You guys were running it for 2 years. Yeah. So in 2019, when you guys were starting this, I was working in-house as a contractor on a web application for the Swedish Armed Forces. And that was after doing I've been a kind of independent, I would say, since 2010. So I was done with university. I have a computer science background, and I was done in 2009, I think. And then I went kind of independent in 2010 and done all kinds of weird projects. Then I had a kid, and then like, okay, we need some stable money. I worked on this in-house contract, and I don't really remember when it. I think it ended like that fall after I came on board with this podcast in 2021. But I was getting like the itch, so I was trying not to start anything because I do love projects, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna build anything, but I could do talks. And I went to this global CFP day where they teach you how to, become a speaker. And they said you can become a speaker on something that you want to learn more about. And I was like, oh,
Mhm.
well, what is that? And at that time, I was actually playing around with Gatsby, which was kind of like the new kid on the block framework wise back then, and made some like open source Gatsby plugins, but didn't try to like make any like business or anything out of it. And I went to this CFP day and I learned all about how to become a speaker. And later that year, I think it was like 2 months after, the Wall Street Journal came out with this like article about how health apps were stealing your data and sharing it with, well, they weren't stealing it, like you gave it away freely, but the big thing was that they were actually sharing this with third parties. And I was like, "Oh, what would it take to make a privacy first period tracker app?" And I started looking into that, and I created one of those talk proposals, and I got accepted. So that fall of 2009, I think I did my talk 4 or 5 times. And while procrastinating, making the slides, I made the app.
As you do.
As you do. And then I launched that in March 2020. And that was kind of like what I wanted to focus on like slow and steady. Um, and that was like kind of what I was working on. That was like my indie hustle, my indie, whatever, indie hacker thing. But then I didn't want to, ended up not continuing on this in-house contract. And I thought like, okay, I'm not going to be making lots of money off of POW, but I should have bet on POW because that's still going, even though I don't even touch it. And we're going to talk about that afterwards. But I was like, okay, I'll become a Gatsby authority. And we did really well, but Gatsby failed. But we did get some good jobs along the way. But that's kind of what I started when we started talking, was like, okay, I'm going to build this Gatsby authority business. Um, yeah. So, and then I guess these days, and then I've done all kinds, because I said I like a project. I've done all kinds of things. But it's funny. So I also kind of wanted to be on slow and steady because it's one of those things I'm not good at. I mean, you're really good at it. You're still on user list. You're like still working on it every day. So when we had that idea of having interviews, I was like, I want to ask these people, like, how do they keep working on the same thing day in and day out? And like, how can I kind of absorb through just sharing space on this podcast, like get some of that. Um, and I realized I'm probably never gonna be that person. I tried with Gatsby, I really tried. I really focused that time, but on the wrong thing. It turns out lots of good things came out of it, but like that wasn't the best bet. But I am now embracing my fractionalness, and I am a fractional developer advocate for Outsera, which kind of came through that Gatsby work. And then we had one of the founders on this show interviewing them. So I feel like that kind of opportunity solidified a little bit through interviewing him on this show and stuff. And then we're also now offering what we call DevRel services based on streaming, because that's what you interviewed me about the first time I was on, live coding. And that's also something I've been doing since 2021, alongside all of the other shenanigans. I feel like
Right, yeah.
shenanigans is just like shenanigans describes what I do. Um, but yeah, as I said, POW still has 30 paying customers. And I am now promising you, Benedikt, that I will have a proper decision for POW by the end of this summer. Like, either I'm going to spend time on it this fall or I'm going to close it down.
That sounds like a big decision, but it's been a long time coming, I guess. I feel like when you initially joined the podcast in 2021,
Yeah.
something like that, um, I feel like we were still very much invested into power and making it
Mhm.
work, and that over the next couple of months kind of fizzled out a little bit, and like you lost, not sure if you lost focus or interest or what it was exactly, but um feels like these days it's not on your radar at all, for the most part.
No, but what I'm seeing, like, going through a little bit for this podcast is that, like, I circle around, and I'm seeing this trend, like, I'm 40 now, and as I said, like, I'm never gonna be the slow and steady, on one thing for years at a time, but I do see that I circle back to things. So, like, I've been interested in no code as a concept, and I keep coming, like, back to that, using it a little bit, like, learning more about that, and I'm, like, circling back, and that works really well with, the work I do with Outseta, which is a back office for membership, sites, and we integrate with all kinds of things, and, like, that interest actually helps in that role. And then I've also seen other things kind of coming back. Like I've made back in the day we made some like audio guide projects. Like now I kind of want to, I want to look into that again. And so things come back. So I'm trying to be mindful and thinking that maybe I can like do slow and steady, but like in a little bit of like a spiral that I can like
Hmm.
spiral between these projects and then they can all kind of go like all feed a little bit off each other and none of them will then become a unicorn. But that's what I realized, like that's not the life I want. Like I love this way of like circling through and kind of accepting that I think is going to be the theme for this year. And also seeing that just doing regular freelance work like where it's on like hourly basis doesn't really work with that because I can't like juggle things in the way that I would like, but the things that I have going now, none of them are like set in stone. I can work on it when I have time and kind of in that way I can give more time to all of the projects. My daughter just came home.
I heard.
So, I'm sorry about that. We told her to hurry up today because she's usually 30 minutes late, so we almost don't make it to dance. So I was like, please hurry up. But now she's like 30 minutes early. So anyway,
Well, she listened. That's a good thing, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, that is a good thing. Yeah, so anyway, so kind of like looking at it as a spiral. It can be a slow and steady spiral. That's how I'm gonna look at it. And one of the things I've circled back to is somebody I talked to on like a tech chat for back in when did I write? I think I wrote it up like back in 2021, right around the time I joined this podcast. I was chatting to a founder of something called which is my favorite product in the whole world. Is my electrical bike that I rent. And I talked to them about no code again because I was like, well, you don't need to build everything, with code. You can use no code tools. And they have built this whole system on no code tools. And now they needed a new tech person and I am their new fractional CTO.
Woohoo!
And this is a
Ooh,
poster I got from them
nice.
years ago. Yeah. Or, AKA their only dev. But I've heard that you call that fractional CTO. So that's what's going on LinkedIn.
That's pretty cool. And that's big.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to say, but congrats, I guess.
Thank you. And I feel like all like looking at all this shenanigans, it's actually led up to both this gig and the gig at Outseta where like because I can't focus, um that is actually what's making me valuable here because I have had experience with all these different tools and I know how they work and they don't need anybody full time. So this company is not in a state like we have 300 customers at this point, I think, and because there's actual hardware, like there's bikes on the ground, so you had to buy new bikes to be able to scale. So they don't need a developer full time or a CTO full time, but they need somebody continuously because things can go down, things need to be fixed, maintained, improved, all of that stuff. So like finally, like these pieces are falling together.
So cool.
Yeah. And then maybe, I'll have time for POW because money is coming in steadily, but not like I don't have to be anywhere from 9 to 5 every day. And it can all like
So the plan is
synergize.
Outsetta, we, and then maybe Pow?
That's what I'm deciding this summer.
Okay. And what happens to live streaming and stuff?
That is the fun thing now because my contracting gig was on the Swedish Armed Forces. You don't live stream that, but I can
Yeah.
live stream work on we, and I'm getting access to the front end of Outset as well because we've done some like re-architecture. So I can work on Outset as well. So I can still do the live streaming on the products that I am working on. So it all works together and it can like spiral upwards.
Sounds good. I'm
Yes.
excited.
I'm excited. But that was like the reintroduction of what we're doing. But we were also going to look back a little bit on on the shows, and we just talked about that on Slack. And I was like, I only looked at the guest episodes because somehow that's where like my interest was. But you thought or you thought like that's probably what it that I realized that makes more sense. Look back at all the episodes and grab some of our favorite ones. So I'll let you like.
Yeah. I'm not even sure I grabbed the favorite ones, but I went through all of our notes. Like we have a document with all of our show notes, basically, or like not show notes, but internal notes for everything single recording from the first one up to the 200s. And I went through that document and just scrolled past the notes and like we're looking for interesting milestones. Hello. Um, and picked the ones that stood out to me a little bit. And to be honest, I deliberately skipped over the guest episodes because I was like, yeah, those were obviously great because we only had like super cool people on in the past. Um, so I took those as a given and was trying to figure out what was good in the other ones. So yeah, maybe to recap a little bit, back in episode number 1, I was still doing the podcast. Or, well, I started the podcast with Brian Ray. And
I
funny
mean, just
enough, we
let's
hadn't.
take a second and look at these names. I mean, you started the podcast with Brian Ray, and your name is
Right,
Benedikt Dike,
right.
and my name is Benedicte Ray.
It had to be, right? I mean, it was destiny.
It was destiny. And sorry to cut you off like that, but also I've been wondering, how did it all start?
How did it all start? Yeah, good question. So I have a little bit of a podcast history even before this podcast.
Mm.
So back in 2013 or something like that, when I was starting to think about becoming a freelancer and quitting my full-time job, I was having regular calls with a friend of mine, um, who back then I think he was studying, but was also interested in building software products and stuff like that. So we had like a mastermind type of call every other week, every week. I don't quite remember, but like a regular call. And at some point, we were like, maybe we should just record this and make it into a podcast. So we did that for a couple of years. Eventually, it fizzled out because I was mostly interested in doing this like as part of my like work. So between 9 and 5, more or less. And he was eventually done with studying and was at work, but his work was not related to any of that at all. So he was most interested in doing that on the side, on the weekends, at night. And so our schedules didn't really align very well. So eventually that podcast stopped. Also, it was in German, so it didn't really scale well, I guess. So we at some point we stopped doing the podcast, and but I always enjoyed podcasting, so I was open to start something new, and was talking to Jane about it, and yeah, not really sure. And Brian back then, he had another podcast called Bright and Early, where he was interviewing people, product people like Justin Jackson, and I don't know, everyone you could think of. And I really enjoyed listening to that podcast. And I think he interviewed Jane at some point. And he initially approached her about starting a podcast where they just chat about what's going on their weeks, like following the journey a little bit. So she knew about my interest in doing this and his interest. So she was like, "Hey, why don't you two do this together?" And that's how it started. And I think we had one call to check each other out before we started the first episode, but that's about it. Yeah, we just started talking and kept talking every week for 2.5 years, something like that, up until I think he left at episode 120 or something like that. So yeah, that was
Have you ever
fun.
met in person?
We have never met. No,
Oh.
um, we were. I think we were planning to meet at MicroConf 2020.
Mm.
And you probably know what happened in 2020, and
Yeah,
eventually I think the entire conference didn't happen,
yeah,
um, uh, which was a bummer for multiple reasons, but that also meant that we haven't met yet.
yeah.
I am still hopeful that it will happen eventually, but so far it hasn't.
Mm. Okay, back to your good research work. I feel like that is also very like the difference in our personalities comes out here.
You think? I don't know.
You're
um,
always prepared. I'm much more YOLO.
it's not like, I mean, you make it sound like I sat down for hours and hours and like listened to everything, but I literally just
I know.
went through the list
I'm just
earlier
joking.
today, like
I'm
more or less last minute, right?
it's just me feeling bad that I didn't like properly do my part. So it's not that it's more on me or towards myself if this comment is coming. But
Okay.
yes.
So yeah, that was episode number one. Was basically we were introduced to ourselves and stuff like that, and
Mhm.
I think episode three was already the one where we launched user list. Um,
Mm.
So it was basically slow and steady. The podcast is basically the story of userless,
Yeah.
more or less.
Well, you're the only
Um,
product still standing because Brian stopped
True,
working on his product. I kind of stopped working on my main product. So it is the story
right.
of userless with some
It's a
shenanigans
survivorship
around it.
bias, I guess, right? Because I mean, Brian over the years worked on a lot of products and tried a lot of
Mm,
things. I think back then he was also like, besides the podcast and everything, he was running a product called Feature Audit.
mhm,
I'm not exactly sure even like by now what it was exactly, but I think it was something analytics like where it would figure out like which are your most popular features and stuff like that.
mm. That's
But I think that
interesting.
didn't work out, and then he started working on, if I remember correctly, something related to remote work
Mm,
and basically making remote teams communicate better with each other or like building more of a connection. I think the tagline was something like remote work doesn't have to be lonely. And I think it was something connecting to Slack to facilitate like
mhm,
one-on-ones and
mhm.
stuff like that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know why that didn't work out, but he eventually transitioned to working on a product around jobs to be done, the jobs to be done framework. Um, and I think the product he's working on right now is kind of a second version of that. But yeah, like he's gone through a lot of iterations on what to focus on and what to build. And it looks like his current product is actually working out. At least that's the last thing I heard from him. Anyways, I've been boring over the last 200 episodes and just like working on user lists. So we launched in episode number 3, and then something around episodes 15, 14, 14, 15, 16, 18, something like that. Um, Jane and I, so Claire left at that point. I'm not sure we ever covered that on the podcast. And that's also a little bit of a theme throughout all of the episodes. I noticed that while I don't think this is necessarily a highlight reel of launching a software product and running a software product, I think we talk about the downsides from time to time as well. I also feel like we are not airing our dirty laundry on air that much. And I'm not saying that like that Claire left and stuff like that had like there are any bad feelings or there's actually dirty laundry, but when major stuff is happening, it's hard to cover this on the podcast as you go along, as it happens. Because I mean, one of the things we did with this podcast, and I'm not sure that people know, but we record this podcast and then basically publish it the day after. At least that's what it started out with. These days, I think it's 2 days after.
Hmm.
But it's not like we record and it takes a month or so for the episode to come out. So whatever I'm saying is public the next day, more or less. And that sometimes prevents us from, at least prevents me from like, being super honest about what's going on, because it
But
could
maybe
as
we
well like
should
affect stuff.
be be better at, like, maybe we should have some, like, what's it called, like, reflection episodes where we look back at things that we tried and be like,
Right.
"Hey, like, let's not gloss over that. Like, why did you or for in my case, like, why did you stop working on that? Or why are you not?" Like, some of
Right.
those things that are more, it's kinda hard to analyze as it's happening, I would say. Even if
Exactly.
with some
Yeah.
of the successes, even we could, go back and have a little look at, like, why do we think that was a success? Because at that time you're doing it, you're just doing the things, and it's hard.
Yeah.
Kinda like when I looked back now, I'm like, "Oh, because, like, I did those interviews, I did network, I did talk to these people through this podcast, but also through, um, conferences and stuff, like, that's giving me opportunities now." Like, as I was going along, I didn't really see them. And it wasn't until I kind of Googled what was I up to June 2021, or not Google, I went to my Google Calendar and I did like June 2021, what was like on my calendar, and there was very little because it was June. And that's when I saw that I had this tech talk with this lady that I am now going to be, working with, as their
Hmm.
fractional CTO. So it's, yeah, sometimes you need to connect the dots looking back because you like as they're happening. Then it's
Right.
easier to like talk about wins also because they're very concrete, while the non-wins are often very not what's it called, like blur not blurry, but they're not as straightforward. to,
Right. Yeah.
so as you say, it's not because you're like trying to hide it, it's just like how do you talk, because you don't really know how to talk about it yet, I think.
Yeah. True. True. And also sometimes it just doesn't feel appropriate to talk about some of the stuff on air. And I
Because you
mean,
don't know how it's gonna play, like, as somebody's leaving a team, you don't know if it's gonna be dirty laundry or not. Like you said, it
exactly. Yeah.
wasn't, but it could have been because you don't know how people will respond in real time.
Exactly, exactly. And some of the stuff also, I mean, you're not sure at the time, like how comfortable is it for people to share this stuff, and yeah, yeah, whatever. Like what I'm trying to say is like while we're trying to not hold back on anything, sometimes it's just like necessary to not tell all of the details right away. And you've got a good point. Maybe we should make it more deliberate to like in hindsight talk about the stuff more, and maybe this episode is sort of like that.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, it could become a regular thing starting now. I'm just like off railing this episode, but I just almost finished a book called Radical Focus. obviously a book I need to
Hmm.
read. And it's a little bit about OKRs, but I feel like it's not in the way that I've seen it talked about in business literature. But she again like harps on that thing where you have to look back at, what did you say you were going to do and what did you do and why didn't you do the things you said you were going to do and why did you do the things that you said you were going to do, because there's themes that will emerge from that. And I feel like a lot for me has been like, if I don't do some of the things that I say I do, I don't want to talk about it because it feels like a failure, but that I didn't complete something. But often it could be a good thing too, right? You don't have to complete every idea or everything you say, because new information could come up and you realize, okay, that's not the way to get to the goal that I'm actually trying to
Right.
reach. But then you have to be able to look back and like be honest and say, well, I did say that, and then be honest about the reason you didn't do it, and was that a
Right.
valid reason
Yeah.
or not, and is it taking me away from my goal or not. And yeah, we could do that more because I need it.
Yeah, we should definitely do that more. But
I
it's,
don't-
I mean, I feel like sometimes it's hard to realize that you're going through something like that, and you maybe only realize like a year after that, oh,
yeah.
actually, this and that happened, and this was
Yes,
this
you can
phase, and
look
this was
back
that
like a
phase.
month or a quarter or a year, and there will be different things you learn depending on
Yes,
like the
yes, for sure.
timeline. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so Claire left.
Claire left. I also remember like that, like in that time frame. Jane and I also met in Croatia for Microconf Europe, and this was the last time we met before we met again in Greece last year. So we didn't see each other for 5 years. Um, but that was a little bit of a pivotal thing. Like for one, Claire left during that time frame. We attended MicroConf. We met people from Tiny Seed. Well, we obviously knew the Tiny Seed founders and stuff, but met Tiny Seed companies there and chatted with them. And I think, yeah, I remember like in Dubrovnik, there's this restaurant at the top of the hill at the cable car station. So we both went up there to have dinner together. It sounds super cheesy, but it was like almost a romantic setting, watching over the sea, looking at the sunset. And we're sitting there and basically making the decision to apply for Tiny Seed that year. Um, and coincidentally, there was also we were also at the conference where we got an offer to buy userlist.com. Previously, we had userlist.io for I think just 4K or something like that.
Mhm.
So this was the microcon where we made the most significant decisions. One was applying for Tiny Seed, and the other one was buying that domain for ridiculous amounts of money, at least back then.
At the time.
Um, at the time. So yeah, that was, I don't know which episode exactly, but something like episode 18. Um, and then fast forward, I guess, in the next couple of episodes, I think you can listen to me getting stressed out by the reality of running a software business that suddenly gets used. So,
If it wasn't for the pesky users, like why?
something like that, yeah. It was a recurring theme that suddenly you had to deal with stuff like stuff wasn't working, wasn't performant, and stuff like that. So trying to, and I feel like this is a recurring theme of the podcast as well as like just trying to keep things working, and like not necessarily in terms of like that suddenly everything is broken all the time, but just staying focused, staying on track, not to get like lost in like the million of things you should be doing, and just like putting on the
Radical
blinders and like
focus.
radical focus, right? And basically, I feel like since we launched the product, I've been struggling with this the entire time, more or less.
Mm.
So that's the recurring theme.
And I think that
Um,
has taught me that I don't want to be solely responsible for a product with that amount of usage. And that has also
yep.
been a good realization, because that is kind of not my that would not be my happy. I'm not saying it's your happy place, but you're good at it and you say you struggle, but I feel like you are good at it. and you make it work. While I think I might end up like, yeah, I would not like to be kind of locked to my computer and at that kind of capacity.
Right. Yeah. It's it's ups and downs, I guess. And I don't love it all of the time, but so far we've made it work. And I get to more into the details and
Hmm.
how we made it work down the road. But fast forward to episode number 25, something along those lines. Um, Not sure if a lot of people know, but I used to run a conference. It was called FemtoConf. We started it together with my friend that I did the previous podcast on. And I guess it kind of evolved from that like early German podcast where we were like, we should do like a meetup for people. And I talked about it with Jane, and Jane was like, I'm coming and I'm giving a talk, and suddenly turned into a conference. So we've been running 3 or 4 editions of that. And in 2020, there was supposed to be another one. And you can basically, episodes 25 something, you can listen to me announcing the conference, selling tickets for the conference, selling out the conference, inviting speakers, and then eventually shutting everything down, refunding everything, and canceling the entire thing. And unfortunately, that was also the last time I worked on that. So, yeah. What you can't listen to into those episodes is around the same time we got accepted into Tiny Seed. Um, but we weren't allowed to talk about it. I think it took on until episode 40, where we finally announced that we got accepted into Tiny Seed and all of that stuff. Um, yeah, let me check. Oh yeah, episode 34. This was COVID was fully in progress, lockdown, everything. I think I talked about like moving from my downtown office into my home office or setting up a home office. And the reason why I'm mentioning this episode number 34 is I think it's the first time I'm mentioning live streaming, live coding, because that's something I started playing around with back then. And I think I was live streaming how I built our in app messaging product a little bit from time to time. And as you already mentioned, like that eventually, like my interest into live streaming stuff eventually led to me inviting you to the show. So I feel like that's a pivotal episode without knowing it was.
Ooh.
Let me see. Wait, wow. Okay, yeah. So I don't think there was a lot of super exciting stuff for the next couple of episodes, but a couple of things happened. Episode 50, we talked about redoing userless website.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember back then people said like it's stupid. Why are you focusing on that? And this is a distraction. But I still think it was a good idea because previously updating anything on the website was a pain and took forever. And now that now after we had the new website, we started to doing a lot of more stuff with content on the website, updating everything much faster, had a better workflow and stuff like that. So while it felt like a little bit like a distraction to people back then, I still totally think this was the best idea or the best thing we could have done, because after that, like the website wasn't a problem anymore. Previously it was.
But I feel like you were saying you didn't redesign it, because I think a lot of what we see and what we say are a distraction for kind of people working on the product is that they they don't want to work on the product, like something is, the fair of the product or the fair, and then it's easy and you go and redesign your website more than actually functionally changing it, like needing let if you're saying that you needed to unlock that people could do marketing experiments, pushing out content, like that sort of thing. It's a little deeper than, oh, we just want to test another framework, or we want
Right.
to or we want other colors, or we want to rebrand, like rebrand-ish, or like that feels more like busy work and like something that is comfortable to do when you should be doing the uncomfortable things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we
But
didn't.
it's hard for somebody looking in to know if which is which.
Right. Yes.
From the
Yes. Yes.
outside, you don't know if the person is doing it for the right
Right.
reason. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think back then, I mean, it's not like we fundamentally changed everything in terms of design, but we rebuilt the entire website from scratch. Like it previously was on WordPress. It was a pain to update and maintain, and we rebuilt it all in a static site. And it's still in the same, like it didn't really change since then. And I guess that tells you
How
enough,
good of
I
a decision
guess.
it was. Yeah, that tells
How
you how
good of
good
a
of a
decision it
decision.
was, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's still the foundation it runs on these days. I mean, I'm starting to get a feeling we should probably redo it at some point, but right now that feels like no, like it's good enough. And previously on WordPress with all of that stuff, it was a of enough website to look at, but it wasn't a good enough of
Mm.
a website to work with.
Mhm.
So yeah, this was an important thing. Um, Episode 64, we talked about redoing user list pricing. And what we landed on during that time frame is actually the same general billing structure that we're still using. So that felt relatively pivotal. Um, and then the next stretch of episodes is something like episode 70 to 80, where I'm not sure how well this comes across.
I mean, this
But
is a
that was,
surprise to me. I'll need to go back and listen to these episodes because this is right before I was a guest.
yeah, yeah, right, true. So 70, 80, I don't know how long it goes, but like that was a time in the journey where I was close to quitting. And I remember there was an episode with AD Pinar in there, and he had written a book
Mm.
about like mental state and stuff like that. And that was a really helpful discussion. And this is probably the one episode we can probably tell a little bit that I'm close to being done with all of it, because user list was in a state where um, we had paying customers. We had a couple thousand in MRR. Um, we were both full time because we took on the user list, the tiny seed funding, but that money was running out. So um, there was a no cash day on the calendar basically,
Mhm.
and things was working well enough to recognize there's something that's working, but not good enough to sustain us over a longer period of time. And as I said, I'm not sure how well this comes across, but Jane and I didn't really agree on how to move forward and all of that. And she was very much in favor of raising more money, and I was very much in favor of not raising more money. Um, and we had some. I don't want to say we had fights, but we had some intense discussions, and there were some pent up frustrations on both sides, I guess.
Mommy and daddy is not
um,
fighting. We're discussing.
we are discussing, yeah. And I think that was 2021. That was also the time where we got evicted from our house. Not because we're not paying, but they wanted to use the house themselves and stuff like that. So overall, that stretch of time was super stressful. And yeah, as I said, like I feel like that stretch of time was the one where I got the closest to quitting and burning out and just like, yeah, stop doing all of it. We eventually agreed on raising money, and we successfully raised a little bit of money to sustain ourselves. Well, basically until today, and it also allowed us to hire a couple of people, and that massively changed a lot of stuff, because the responsibilities weren't resting just on both of our shoulders anymore. We had a little bit of a team that would help out with stuff that we were not good at, that we didn't like, or like just just having Leo as our front end developer was a massive improvement in my quality of life because it
I
allowed me
remember
to just
that.
like not really having to focus on one like on so many things at all the time. So he was basically taking care of all of the front end stuff, and I just didn't have to worry about that anymore. Anyways, episode
And after he came
93.
on board, you took your first vacation without a laptop.
I never took a vacation without my
Well, you didn't
laptop. That
open it. There was
I
like
did
one
probably.
vacation.
Yeah, it's happening more often, and I
Mm.
just got back from vacation as well. Like, and I this time I opened my laptop once for work, and that was basically the first Monday after vacation, and it was just a minor issue, and I basically was just like marking with a check mark and be like, okay, that's something I can worry about when I'm back. And then I did not open it, at least not for work, for the next 2 weeks. So that was a win.
Such
Um,
a win. I'm happy for you.
and thank you. And all of that is basically thanks to Jane insisting on we raising a little bit of money, because that allowed us to build a team, sustain ourselves a little bit longer, and as I said, it worked out in terms of like didn't have to raise more money, and at this point we kind of break even, so it's self-sustaining, and yeah, we made it work. Um, but anyways, episode 93, I had you on as a guest to talk about live streaming.
Yes. And I still live stream.
You still live stream. That's the one thing you focus on, right?
See? Okay, yeah. See, I don't like this is also the thing when you look back at your own, you see, yeah, live streaming has become a constant. I just love live streaming. We have so much
And
fun with
like
it.
podcast recording, I guess,
And
which is
podcast
also live
recording.
streamed these days. So
Yeah, but it's the same kind of deal. Like you show up, you do it, you keep focused, right? It's a forced focus.
right,
And like I just get energized from it. I get yeah, happy I guess from like this shouldn't, as we talked about before, shouldn't be a surprise to, wouldn't be a surprise to anybody but me, that these like these things, I enjoy these things,
right,
and we're actually like working on it now as a product, because what I've this is the thing I've learned also by talking to you and like talking through things over the years. It's that I often don't see the value in the things that I enjoy. Like, I don't realize that not everybody, can do the things, because they're things that are easy to you. You're like, well, anybody could just do that. Like, that's not what I can sell. So ended up like creating products or creating things where it's like I sell the hard part because that's what I think people would pay for, because that's what I would pay for. But they're hard for me. So
right,
realizing that we love live streaming so much and realizing that having guests on has worked really well. We're like, well, instead of trying to sell edited videos, which is like hard for me, let's just sell live streaming. And it's like, Eureka! And that's what we're testing out now on the side is live streaming and building together with other people, and then let that be marketing assets for those people. And our first customer comes from a listener, so again, Slow and Steady has
nice.
been pivotal in my more pivotal into my life than I knew. Yeah, but so that's a little thing that I've learned a little bit. And also like, wanting to have a product and then listening to you talk about these uptime issues, and this is like, no, 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 no. Like this is like I don't want a unicorn, but I do like building things, and I do like building products, and I do want to have things that are in real production and not just like fake production. So, but then finding, and then POW is actually working, right? It's just working without me touching it, and like being
Right.
able to be a part of a team where scale is 1,000 users, like that is like it's a sweet spot for me, like that I think I will enjoy. Um, but yeah, so I've learned a lot talking out loud every week or every other week.
Just laughing because I feel like maybe the main achievement of me doing this podcast is like deterring people from building products.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, but I do think there is a space. you say, okay, you haven't been 100% like honest about all the downside and stuff, but like showing up and talking about it every week, like you get to I get to know um your life, like how's your life because of this choice to build user list. And I think that is important because a lot of people, they see, this is the analogy, like they see a band performing it on stage and you want to be that band, but you don't want to practice in the basement every damn week, right? And if you don't want to do that, then you shouldn't have a band and be on stage as part of a band. You can be on stage in
Right.
other ways maybe, or but you have to like your life between the highlights, right? Between the wins. It's not like you're never gonna it's not that you should never do things that are boring or annoying or and stuff like that, but like if you really like hate all the activities, should you really, you know
Right.
choose to build something or work on something that will give you all of those activities?
Yep.
um and like, will you enjoy part of the journey? And like, there will be hard times, but all in all, like, I hope at least that it is for you, like you can see that you built this and it's worth it, and it's not like it's been like hate every day showing up, working on these like performance bottlenecks. And because you get fired up when you talk about it, you find it interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
That's true. Like, I
And
mean, I don't.
challenging.
For the most part, I
Yeah.
feel like usually when I get to work every morning, I enjoy going to work and like starting to work. I mean, some days not, obviously, but the vast majority of days I like working on this thing. And I think Jane and I keep saying this to each other, like, sure, like we're not opposed to eventually like selling this or whatever, but this is not our bet. Like, we're not doing this to build a product that we eventually just sell and make a shit ton of money. Um, if that happens, that's nice. But if it doesn't, we at least want to build ourselves a place that we like working at. Um, so that's very much at the core of our values, like building an environment that we enjoy working in, that we enjoy, like working on stuff that we enjoy, working with people that we enjoy working with, and just having a nice, pleasant work environment for the both of us. That's like one of our goals with the company, and so far it's looks like it's working out. And sure, it's not always nice and not always rosy and shiny and pleasant, but for the most part it is, and I'm very happy and proud about that.
Yeah, and I think I
Anyways.
I realized at some point that this, what looks like chaos and which is chaos, for me, is what I enjoy. Like, I enjoy that there are like multiple project running and like things are happening, and sometimes I hate it. But overall, like the times I've really focused and just done one thing and probably could have gotten further with it, I end up not doing it because it's like I need those like synergies to happen. I need to be able to connect people. I need to work with different teams. And like realizing that and just accepting that instead of trying
Yeah.
to trying to change and be like, okay, well then I'll build products in this way. And that's what I need to figure out this summer, at least, like how much time could I, if I choose to keep on with power, like instead of thinking I have to put all my energy into it, could I make it work with doing like a sprint every 6 months or something like that, like, and be okay with it just growing very, very slowly. um and like, what do I want from it? Like, what do I want from the
Yeah.
different projects?
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so I joined live streaming and talked about live streaming, and you
Yes.
tried live streaming and you did not like live streaming.
It just didn't really work out for me, I guess. And I was using Ecamm Live for live streaming, and while I was away, I noticed that my when I got back, I noticed that my annual license for that piece of software that I didn't use for the past year got renewed for another year, and I was like, "Well, shit."
Well, there you have my life. Oh, this is the best
Maybe.
feature. This is the best feature of the new business bank that I'm using, is that it has an app and I get a notification everything something has been deducted from my card. So, and now
Hmm.
like my new rule is if I see something like that, I'll go and cancel it like right away. Because
Yeah.
when I review, because the times where you need to like review and send in your your paperwork to the accountant, like that's
Hmm.
then you don't have time to go and like cancel things, and you like write it up in a notebook, like it needs to happen, while it's
the,
happening.
the 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 one thing, like, I'm not sure if I think this is genius or super rude, is with that particular piece of software. It's a Mac app,
Hmm.
and to cancel it, you have to open the Mac app, go into the settings, and cancel. But I haven't used the thing in the past year. I got a new computer sometime last year. I don't even have the software installed.
Oh no,
So
that
it's
shouldn't
not
be
like
allowed.
canceling that subscription is actually quite a bit of a, well,
You're gonna
all
pay for
things
another
considered, it's
year.
not that hard. But like, I have to download it, install it, unsubscribe, and then deinstall it. And just the thought of doing that useless dance makes me not cancel it, which is stupid. I know, but maybe I should start live streaming it, and I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Anyways, you came on episode number 93 as a guest, and I think it only took us one more episode to bring you on as a regular host. So you made an impression during that one episode, I guess.
Or Brian wanted to
Um,
leave, and he was like, "Well, now I can leave."
yes, like Ryan at the time, which is also an interesting story. He was doing a year on the road kind of thing. So they bought a camper van and not a camper van, like a camper and a truck, I think.
Yeah.
So he was basically calling in from around the US every week from a different place, and they were traveling the country with a family of five, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and it was, I think, in part it was interesting because it made good content and interesting stories. But I also felt like it was wearing him down a little bit, and also
Hmm.
they had some. I think they had some initial troubles of like getting this going and like getting a smooth
I think
experience,
they
and
cut
then
it short. I think this
yeah,
wasn't. I mean, I think
it didn't.
he like said it was like worth doing it, but it wasn't like a thing that they wanted to do for the next years, like some people,
Yeah, yeah.
do. Yeah.
I think it didn't turn out quite the way they imagined it to turn out,
Hmm.
and it sounded like they still had a good time, but they
Yeah.
cut it short, and
But I think it's
I
really
felt
cool
like
that they cut it short, because that's like one of those things where you're like, well,
that's
no,
a
like we have to,
mature
we've
decision,
committed,
right? Yeah,
and like we
yeah.
talked about earlier, that sometimes it's okay to be like, no, we're not going to keep
Yes,
on doing
yes.
this.
And I think like that was not ideal, I guess. And then I think he was pretty burned out by consulting in general and working on a software product that didn't really work out
Mhm,
back then. So I think he was close to burning out. And
mhm,
with him traveling around and having spotty internet and stuff like that, it wasn't always like scheduling was a problem, and it wasn't always quite clear if he'd actually be able to show up. And having, because I had so much fun recording with you, I think I suggested just bringing you on as a third co-host for a while, or like, yeah. I think initially we said like, let's give this a trial and
mhm.
do this for a couple episodes, just so that if he doesn't show up, we can still have a conversation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not like, because I
You're
don't I
talking,
don't enjoy recording episodes by my own. That's
yeah,
kind of weird. So
and
by
it's
having
hard
three
organizing
co-hosts,
guests
we
every time. Like it's
exactly.
yeah.
So this way we could at least have a conversation. And you joined in episode number 95, and
Mhm.
yeah,
And
you
since
haven't
then,
left since.
I haven't left. And I feel like we covered kind of my story in the beginning, like all the like doing all kinds of things, and you can like complete your story, because we're already at like the hour, and I need to take
Right.
the Pirate Princess to dance class very soon.
Ooh, yeah, we should hurry up. Um, I mean, this is also something I noticed, that I wrote a lot of notes about like episodes 1 to 100, or like
Yeah.
picked a lot of episodes
And then I
since.
joined, and nothing more fun
And then you
happened.
joined, and then nothing more fun happened. No, honestly, I mostly focused on like my side of the story, because I
Mm.
was thinking you focus
We're
more on
focusing.
your side of the
Well,
story.
talked a lot in the beginning, so it's fine. And your story is so interesting.
But anyways, I noticed that like in the following episodes, like around episode 120, something like that, Brian actually announces that he's leaving, and he took a full time job at GitLab. They not working anymore. But what was the last episode we had him on? I don't remember.
No, he was back
Um,
as a guest twice, like once when I was there and once you two chatted.
right,
YouTube. No,
that's
you two.
on February 8th.
Yeah,
Not sure
yeah,
which episode that was
yeah,
exactly. Episode number 195. He was
yeah.
back, so he can. Yeah, if you want to know the details, you can listen to that one. But he quit the podcast. So the two of us kept going, and around the same time we started, like, because we had the additional funding, we started hiring. So we hired a front end developer, we hired Katarina, our community advocate, and after a long journey with a couple of candidates and a couple of failed yeah, people that where it didn't work out, we eventually hired Michael, who's been running customer support since. And
And just to shoot in, because I feel like Michael has been one of the people that kind of helped me in accepting my fractionalness, because he runs a product part
right.
time, and then he's customer support for you part time, and then he has a podcast, which I guess is kind of marketing for his product. But um, I met him in London when I was there visiting my dad, and we I remember talking a lot about like that and being interested
Hmm.
in that,
Yeah.
and not, yeah, because it feels like there's a lot of kind of voices who are like, "You have to choose the one thing." I even read the book, "The One Thing," um, and 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 yeah, he was very. Thank you, Michael. You have been a great support through the years.
Yes, for sure. He's been helping me a lot with database issues as well.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I keep saying this. Like, sometimes feels like we hired him to do customer support, and he does an amazing job at that, and like helps me like stay sane with not even like some days I even don't look at customer support inbox at all, and it helps me keep sane at times. But it also feels a little bit like cheating to have him off on the team, and then when I'm running into deep database issues, I hop on a call with him and just ask him questions, and we discuss stuff. And he has just a lot of knowledge about Postgres, our database. And again, it feels like cheating having free access to him that way.
But I think he loves working with you guys. I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's definitely a win-win, especially for us, and I hope so for him a little bit as well. But anyways, what I wanted to say is, I feel like in the past 100 or so episodes, there haven't been any like major milestone episodes anymore. I feel like a lot of the stuff I'm talking about on the podcast in the last 2 years or so has basically been like business as usual of sorts, like just showing up and doing the work, even if it's boring. And sure, we launched a couple of features along the way, and we had a couple of problems along the way, but I want to say it's less ups and downs, but emotionally, I feel like those are still there. But like maybe objectively, it's a little bit smoother these days. Um, so yeah, and I guess that's also why we switched to from weekly to bi-weekly
Yeah, first we
episodes,
started with
because there's
having
less.
guests, like, we had guests
Right.
on, which I think was it just takes a lot of time, like, admin-wise, but I would love to do more guest
Hmm.
episodes again,
Right.
and then we
Me too.
changed to every other week because yeah, because they're not you're more of a stable company, right? And
Yeah.
it that things aren't like you suddenly not getting you're not just, like, suddenly getting funding, or, like, things are almost that there's less of those kind of chaotic, or not even chaotic, but, like, these big milestones, just like you said,
Right.
um, and more in maintenance mode. And then I've also been kind of in the like, well, what am I gonna do? And like, it doesn't really change that much between 2 weeks. Well, it changes a lot, but like, we don't need to bring you into all of my ideas and thoughts. But I think that will change a little bit moving forward, though, for me, since I now have two products that I will be working on, and I feel like I can talk about. And I talked not enough about, like I said, on the challenges we are facing, but like I want to talk more about that with you and like how, how we can do things. And the same thing with we, there's more things for me to talk about. And
Right.
it was harder when I was working, because during this time I've had a contract gig at a bank, and similarly as the other contract I had, like I can't really talk about it, even though there's a lot to talk about. Um,
Yeah.
they just merged two banks this Easter. I wasn't there anymore, but like there's lots of things to talk about, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. So like having these two kind of gigs that are both startups and both building products, like well, Otsera isn't a startup anymore. We've been around since 2015 or something, or like, I don't know. It's
Useless isn't a startup
bootstrapped.
anymore either, I
No,
guess.
but I would say we is still, a little bit of a startup, and there's like lots of things. They just did a crowdfunding round, and there's bound to
Nice.
be like challenges moving forward, both in terms of like business and technology. So hopefully, um, we'll have kind of more building products things to talk about,
Oh,
which
I'd
is
love
kind of the
that.
title of the show. Um,
Yes, it's in the intro of at least, yeah.
yeah.
I'd love to talk more about stuff like that because I feel like product wise, I feel like I've been the one talking a lot about user
Hmm.
list, and
Hmm.
you've been
I just
mostly
talk about
doing
life.
consulting in the past
Yeah.
past years, which is fine. Like I think we talked about this in the past at some point. I feel
Mhm,
like if it's not the right fit anymore or whatever,
mhm.
and even with Brian back then, but I feel like that's life and that's part of the story that like some products just don't work out, and
And
why
then you
should
have
we
to
stop
find a new way.
following the story, even you're not working on a product at the moment, which is I think I like that. So,
Yeah.
but I also like talking about products. So
Yeah. And it's kept me
I'm excited.
sane, because the backdrop to all of this that I have talked about on the show is that my mom has struggled. She can never get free with Alzheimer. And she will be leaving our house or our property within the next month or two, which will also free up my energy to actually work more on products. So both the
Not sure if I
gigs,
want to say that's nice, but I appreciate you
I
having more mental energy for other
mental
stuff.
energy, headspace, I would say, just like more headspace,
Headspace, yeah,
hopefully. I will say it's a good thing. It's needed. We've done what we can at home, and I'm very
right.
happy that I pushed for this 2 months ago or a month and a half ago, and I was uncertain. I was like, she's not that bad. Like it's fine. And then over the last month, it's just gone completely downhill. At the
Oh
point
no.
where if I walk past or I walk into her house, if I do that 5 times within 15 minutes, she will sit up and look at me like a girl on her first day of school every time and say, "Hello, hello, hello." And it's like, yeah, I was in there getting laundry 5 minutes ago and 10 minutes ago and 15 minutes. Like
Hmm.
it's so there's like no working memory at this point. So I'm very happy that I forced that through, and hopefully we will be able to get her into a home within, yeah, a month or two, depending on what the city comes up with in terms of this is, talk about product and communication.
Hmm.
It says, by law, uh, we will give you a space within 2 weeks. But if we don't, we'll put you on the waiting list.
Nice.
And then there's a link to the law. I'm like, thank you. Thank you very much. This
You'll
is
get it
super
by
helpful.
within 2 weeks, unless you won't. Then you're not getting it anytime soon.
So that kind of a sad note to leave it at, but I think we'll lead it at that. I think there's going to be lots of exciting things in the future for us to talk about.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that, and I'm more excited about the podcast than I've been in a while. So
Yeah.
on
And
to
I
the
think
next, at least 100.
another 100. We shall make another 100. And I
Oh, this will
think,
take a while at the current
yeah,
pace.
next episode, we can talk through We's tech stack.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
There's about 10 different services at play.
Interesting.
Let's
Well,
just leave it at
leave it
that.
at
That's a teaser.
that. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for co-hosting this podcast with me for the past, what do we say, 104 episodes or something like that.
Thank you
It's
for
been a
listening to me
blast.
ramble on every other week or whatever. It's kept me sane.
These episodes would be a lot more boring without you on it. So thanks for that.
Thank you for asking me back in the day. And thank you for keeping up with it. And I'll see you around the interwebs.
Yep. See you. Bye.